Hi, my name is Leona. I paid $7,000 to celebrate my new beginning, my own housewarming party. But when I opened the door, I walked into a birthday party for my son's dog. Balloons, bone-shaped cakes, guests I'd never met, all cheering for Barkley. No one said my name, not once. But that wasn't the worst part. What do you do when the people you love most rewrite your life like you were never in it to begin with? And how do you take back your place, without screaming, without begging, just by standing still and being seen? Would you stay silent, or would you finally speak? It was supposed to be my day. Late spring light filtered through the windshield as I pulled into the driveway of my new house in Fredericksburg. I had picked out this place myself, a quiet two-story home on a tree-lined street, the kind of house that looked like it had been waiting just for me. A fresh chapter. That's what it was meant to be. I adjusted the silk scarf around my neck, took a steady breath, and stepped out. My heels tapped softly on the brick path, echoing the rhythm of a heart carrying cautious hope. Inside, I expected familiar warmth. Friends, maybe a toast, a nod to the journey I'd taken after James passed. What greeted me instead was a wall of pink and blue balloons, cartoon paw prints on streamers, and a life-size cardboard cutout of a golden retriever wearing a party hat. A massive banner stretched across the dining room arch. "Happy Barkday, Barkley!" I blinked once, then again, hoping I'd walked into the wrong house. But no, this was my house. Mine. From the speakers came a playlist of dog-themed songs. Guests, most of whom I didn't recognize, wore matching paw print party hats, laughing and snapping selfies, with a dog lounging proudly on a velvet cushion. Barkley, my son Dorian's golden retriever, was the undisputed star of the night. I stood at the entrance a moment too long before forcing a smile and stepping in. A woman in a coral dress brushed past me and said, "You must be the groomer. Where should I leave the gifts?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat tightened, but I smiled again. Something I've learned to do when words fail. They kept calling it his big day. People took turns feeding Barkley dog-friendly cupcakes, all while Dorian stood beside him like a proud father, arm around his girlfriend Ophelie, who looked as though she'd just won a pageant. I scanned the room, hoping for a sign, maybe a small sign, of the original purpose of the evening. Nothing. No welcome mat, no mention of congratulations on the house, not even a framed photo of me. Just dogs. Everywhere. I caught sight of Ophelie by the drink table, laughing as she opened a bottle of Prosecco. I approached slowly, trying not to let the tightness in my chest show. She turned toward me, smiled briefly, and handed me a champagne glass. My eyes fell on the etching along the rim. Mom of Barkley. I stared at it for a heartbeat. Then I took the glass. Maybe they'd acknowledge me in a toast, I thought. Perhaps this was just a quirky opening, a nod to the dog. And later, they'd shift toward the real reason everyone was here. But as the minutes dragged on, that hope faded. Near the snack table, a man handed me a folded invitation card. "Thought you might want a keepsake," he said kindly. I opened it. The card was a pastel explosion of bones, paw prints, and cartoon fireworks. At the bottom, "Hosted with love by Dorian and Ophelie." No mention of me. Not a word. $7,000. That's what I'd wired to Dorian 3 weeks ago. I was in the middle of organizing boxes, finishing a consulting project, and recovering from a cold. I had trusted him. I said, "Take care of the planning, use the money, make it special." I should have known better. But I didn't think even he would turn a housewarming into a spectacle where I wasn't even on the list. I tucked the card into my purse. My fingers brushed the edge of the checkbook I'd carried, just in case I needed to tip the caterers. It stayed there, untouched. The sun outside had begun to dip, casting gold along the window panes. I drifted toward the large picture window and looked out, trying to ground myself. Across the lawn, I saw Barkley being lifted onto a faux throne as someone snapped photos of him with a tiny cake in front of his nose. Ophelie leaned in, her arm draped around Dorian's neck, both beaming. I took a sip from the champagne flute. The taste was sweet, but the air around me had gone sour. I paid for this stage, I whispered to myself, voice low and steady, and tonight I disappeared on it. The laughter didn't stop. It rolled through the house in waves, rising and falling with the rustling of wine glasses and the occasional bark from Barkley, who now wore a satin bow tie. I stood by the kitchen island, still holding the untouched champagne glass from earlier, trying to catch a familiar face. I didn't. I drifted from group to group, smiling when necessary, nodding when expected. But the conversations weren't meant for me. These weren't my friends. Not one of the people I had written into the guest list for my housewarming were here. No colleagues from the university, no neighbors from my old street, no cousins from San Antonio. Instead, I found myself surrounded by Ophelia's influencer friends, Dorian's new age startup buddies, and a few loud types I couldn't place at all. Each time I introduced myself, I was met with a polite smile, followed by a glance toward the dog or a quick change of topic. I was nobody here, and the realization spread through me like dye in water, quiet but irreversible. "Excuse me." A young woman in a turquoise jumpsuit approached me near the bar, holding a phone and a leash. "Are you the event coordinator? I just wanted to ask if Barkley has a scheduled nap window, or if he can just mingle." It took me a second too long to answer. I blinked, forced a smile. "He's free to mingle," she grinned. "Great! You've really put together something adorable." She walked away before I could say another word. I didn't correct her. What would have been the point? I moved toward the back hallway, needing a moment. Just a moment to breathe. The door to my study, what used to be my study, was cracked open. Inside, I saw Barkley's crate, his water bowl, and Ophelia's oversized dog-themed calendar pinned to the corkboard where I once kept notes for my classes. My books were gone. The carpet was new, beige, synthetic, and utterly lifeless. As I turned back, I overheard Ophelia speaking to a couple near the stairwell. "This is our first real event in the new place," she said, beaming. "It means a lot. We've been wanting something like this for ages." The woman nodded, sipping from her glass. "You two are lucky. This is a gorgeous home." Ophelia leaned in, smiled wider. "We're really grateful. It feels like ours already." Ours. That one word hit like a thrown glass, sharp, splintering, and perfectly placed. I hadn't signed over anything, not legally. We hadn't discussed co-owning the house. She didn't contribute a single cent to the down payment, or the furniture, or the landscaping. But there she was, speaking with the confidence of a crowned queen. The floor felt oddly unstable under me, like the ground was playing tricks. Later, I found myself back near the kitchen. A group of Ophelia's friends were gathered, one of them pointing at the gold accents on the curtains. "I just love how Ophelia put this all together," someone said. "She has such an eye." Another chimed in. "It's like she was made to own a house like this." Ophelia giggled, adjusting her dress. "Dorian and I just wanted something that really felt like ours, you know? A fresh start." The bile rose fast, bitter and hot, but I swallowed it. Not today. Instead, I walked outside. The sun was halfway down, coloring the backyard in orange hues. I stood at the edge of the patio, half shielded by a potted ficus, and watched. A makeshift throne, gold painted with tassels and a pillow, stood at the center of the yard. Barkley was lifted onto it by Dorian and another man. The guests clapped and cheered as Ophelia crouched beside them, camera ready. Snap, flash, cheers again. The house behind me buzzed with more laughter, and music floated in the background like an old memory. I stood there, invisible in plain sight, watching them immortalize a moment that didn't include me. "You made me invisible," I murmured, voice caught in the wind. "But I'm still here." I stayed outside longer than I planned, my fingers brushing against the cool metal of the patio railing. From the edge of the garden, laughter and music spilled out through the open doors. The same voices that had filled my house, now seemed to bounce off its walls without touching me at all. A woman approached with a wine glass in one hand, her other adjusting a wide-brimmed hat. I recognized her vaguely, someone I'd worked with on a school board committee years ago. Her eyes lit up, but not with recognition. "So, you visiting too?" she asked lightly, sipping from her glass. I blinked. The words landed with a kind of casual cruelty she hadn't intended. My breath caught for a moment. "No," I said softly. "I live here." Her smile faltered for a second. Then she nodded politely and walked on. I stood there alone again, each second stretching longer than the last. When you become invisible long enough, people assume you were never there. That's the part that stings. Not being ignored, but being presumed irrelevant. I crossed the yard toward the garden beds, or what used to be garden beds. The rosemary, sage, and mint James and I had planted were gone. In their place, a fenced area of artificial turf, a plastic slide shaped like a bone, and a small agility hoop Barkley hadn't even touched. I crouched near the soil. It smelled foreign now, rubbery, synthetic, sterile. I ran my hand over the dirt, but there was no warmth, no life in it. Just packed filler and a memory erased. A faint breeze stirred, carrying with it a scent I didn't recognize. Not basil or lavender like before, but something sweet and chemical. Dog shampoo, maybe. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I was back in that old garden, the summer heat hanging heavy, James laughing as the hose slipped and sprayed us both. The way he used to say, "You always plant more than we can eat, Leona," and I'd reply, "We feed more than ourselves, remember?" Now I couldn't even feed my own roots. Someone called out Barkley's name from the porch, and I turned to see Dorian tossing a squeaky toy across the lawn. The dog bounded past me, knocking my shoulder as he ran. No apology, no glance back. I walked around the side of the house to the front porch and leaned against the railing, trying to collect myself. A small group of guests were talking near the steps. One of them, holding a sparkling water, nodded toward the house and said, "Such a great space. Did you see the kitchen? Ophelie's really made it hers." Another added, "It's just got her touch everywhere. Feels like she was born to live here." I didn't move. Not even when another woman looked over and said, too loudly, "Wait, do you live here too?" The question wasn't cruel. It wasn't even curious. It was indifferent. I smiled gently, like I was handing over a napkin at a restaurant. "Yes, I do." They nodded, chuckled politely. "Well, you've got yourself a lovely home?" Dorian was nearby. He heard it. I saw the flicker of something pass through his expression, but he said nothing. Not even a half-hearted, "This is my mom's place." Just silence. That silence settled into my bones, more bitter than the Texas heat. Later, I stepped inside to cool off. The air conditioning hummed low, masking the murmurs of another conversation just ahead. Dorian and Ophelie stood by the fireplace, admiring a framed photo of Barkley in front of the mantel. "I think we need to switch out some of these older accents," Dorian said, adjusting a vase I'd picked up in Santa Fe after James passed. "It's time to update the vibe." I raised an eyebrow, stepping into the room. "The house was just renovated last year." He shrugged. "It's not about age, Mom. It's about energy. This isn't your era anymore." Ophelie snorted into her wine. "Exactly. This place needs light, not mahogany." I nodded slowly, hands clasped behind me. I said nothing. Not my era. Maybe it never was. Maybe all this time I was just the down payment. The bank loan with a heartbeat. But I paid for every brick. And they were just living in it. As I stood by the sliding glass door, the sky dimmed into violet. My reflection blurred across the glass, faded by the indoor lights and the rising dark. I barely recognized the woman staring back. Her posture was straight, but something in her eyes was breaking. They're redesigning the story, and I'm not even a footnote. But somewhere, beneath all that silence, a thought stirred. Write your own chapter. The house had grown dimmer. not from a change in lighting, but in tone. People were gathering around the main room where Barclay's throne, yes, a throne, had been staged for photos. Someone dimmed the overheads, and the soft hum of conversation dipped into a hush. Dorian stood at the front, champagne glass in hand, his posture too perfect, like he'd rehearsed. He tapped the side with a spoon, drawing attention as a few people pulled out phones to film. "Thank you all for being here," he began, voice bright and light. "It means the world to Ophelie and me. Tonight's celebration has been a long time coming." I stood off to the side, half shielded by a tall plant near the hallway. My hands were clasped in front of me, heart thudding, not from nerves, but something else. Hope, maybe. Just a sliver. "We've poured our hearts into this," he continued, "and we want to thank those who made it all happen." I held my breath. Maybe he'd surprise me. Maybe he hadn't forgotten after all. "Ophelie, thank you for organizing everything, from the decorations to the playlist to Barclay's outfit." Scattered laughter. Her hand waved, modestly, as a camera flashed. "And to Barclay, of course," Dorian added, smiling at the dog. "You've brought joy into our lives in ways we never expected." The crowd chuckled again. Some even applauded. "And to all of you," he said, scanning the room. "Thank you for helping us make this night unforgettable." He raised his glass. Others followed. Glasses clinked, cheers erupted, and just like that, it was over. No mention of me. I didn't need applause. I didn't need a spotlight, but one sentence, one word. I paid, I planned, I existed, and I still wasn't worth a sentence. The glass in my hand felt heavier than before. I set it down on a side table and made my way around the edge of the room. My shoes barely made a sound on the tile. When the group dispersed slightly, I found Dorian standing by the bar, refilling his drink. "Dorian," I said quietly. He turned, surprised. "Hey, Mom, enjoying yourself?" "It might have been nice," I said slowly, "to hear my name, even once." His smile faded slightly. He chuckled, not mean, but dismissive. "Come on, don't make this about you. You're being too sensitive." I stared at him. Not at the floor, not at the wall. At him. Ophelie passed behind him, hearing just enough to toss in, "Oh, don't worry, Leona. Everyone knows how much you love to host." Then she winked, like it was an inside joke I'd somehow volunteered for. I said nothing. What was there to say? I stepped back, gave him a smile I no longer meant, and turned toward the far corner of the room. There was a time I'd cry about this. That version of me would have slipped into a guest room, shut the door quietly, and let it all out behind the sound of a locked latch. But not tonight. Tonight, I just took notes. I walked to the seat near the window, where I'd dropped my purse earlier, and pulled it into my lap. Unsnapped the clasp. Reached inside and found the thing I'd tucked there before leaving the house. A folded envelope. Unmarked. Quiet. My fingers curled around it gently, but I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I stared down at the floor tiles, tiles I had chosen with a contractor, with my own cash and time, and thought, there's a line, and tonight, you crossed it. The smell of frosting and grilled sliders hung heavy as I moved through the kitchen toward the patio. The lights had shifted from warm daylight to the golden haze of evening, casting long shadows across the tiled floor. The party, if one could still call it that, was now in full bloom. Every inch of the house was taken over. Music louder, laughter looser, drinks stronger. A young staffer, maybe a hired friend of Ophelie's, stopped me by the back door with a clipboard in hand. "Hi, Ms. Shipman?" Ophelie asked if you could keep Barclay close while the cake's being cut, just so he doesn't get too excited. I blinked. "You want me to watch the dog?" She smiled brightly, already halfway turned away. "You're the only one he listens to," she said. And that was that. I stood there, rooted, as Barclay ran circles on the artificial turf. A few guests pointed at him, cooing like he was some small deity. Someone shouted, "Look at him go!" like it was the highlight of the night. I moved to the edge of the yard, still within view, but distant enough to breathe. "Barkley's got the best nanny in Texas!" a voice called out behind me. I didn't need to turn to know who said it. Another one of Ophelie's curated friends. I forced a smile, let it hang there like a frozen photograph. My chest didn't burn. Burning was for fresh wounds. This was calcified, hardened. "You're not just cutting me out," I thought. "You're making me the help." That line settled in my ribs like lead. An hour later, the crowd reassembled in the living room. The lights dimmed slightly, and Dorian stood once again at the center, glass raised. Another toast. Another performance. "I just want to take a moment," he said, "to thank someone very special tonight." I straightened slightly, not with hope, but curiosity. "This night wasn't just about Barkley," he continued. "It was also a surprise for Ophelie, our way of celebrating our new chapter, making this house feel like a home." He gestured toward her. The crowd applauded. "Every detail," he said, voice full of rehearsed affection, "was crafted with love. Together, we made it happen." Ophelie clutched his arm dramatically, as if they'd just announced an engagement. The cheers were louder this time. I didn't cheer. I didn't blink. I just touched my purse, where I had slipped in a printed spreadsheet before leaving the house. A copy of every transaction, food, decor, chairs, lights, every dollar paid by me. But in this version of the story, I wasn't even an extra. I was the prop truck. As the applause died down, I stepped out back again, letting the cooler air anchor me. The garage was just past the side gate. I found Dorian there, finally alone, unbuttoning his collar. "Nice speech," I said. He turned. "Mom, don't start." "I'm not starting anything. I'm finishing a thought," I replied. "You're free to celebrate whoever you want, but don't ever use what I built to erase me." He laughed, short, sharp. "It's not that deep. We just wanted it to feel ours." "Then build yours next time," I said evenly. "This one's mine." His jaw tensed, but he didn't respond. I walked back into the house without waiting for him. Inside, I pulled out my phone, found the app I'd used with the county clerk. I tapped twice. A quiet ping confirmed the update. Ownership, sole title, Leona Shipman. I closed the app and slid the phone back into my purse. They erased me from the night. I just erased them from the deed. The backyard had thinned out. Empty cups lined the patio rail. Guests stood in small clusters now, their voices quieter, drunker, or simply tired. I stayed near the door, half in shadow, watching them linger as if the evening still held some magic. But for me, that spell had broken hours ago. My eyes followed a familiar box on the gift table, deep mahogany with brass corners, wrapped in a velvet ribbon I'd tied myself. A gift from my own mother on the day James and I moved into our first home. I'd brought it here to symbolize something, maybe to pass it on, maybe to prove I still had roots in this house. And then I saw it. Ophelie, laughing as she opened the lid like it was a joke. "Oh, look at this little treasure box. Barkley, your treats are going in here." She dumped a few squeaky bones inside and called the dog over. Barkley pounced. His paw slammed the lid shut. The soft velvet scratched. One of the brass corners bent as he nudged it across the floor like a toy. I didn't move, just watched. It wasn't the box. It was what it had carried. Memory, grace, intention. And they'd turned it into a chew toy. I slipped back inside the house, moving toward what used to be my study. It had been turned into Barkley's indoor play zone. No surprise there. Rubber mats, a toy bin. But the room still had a filing cabinet in the corner. I sat beside it and pulled my purse onto my lap. From its depths, I retrieved a manila folder. Inside were 3 documents: the revised deed, the affidavit of sole ownership, and the property statement with every line item highlighted. I stared at them for a long moment, letting my fingers rest on the paper. My attorney had said, "Once you file this, it's yours alone again." I had filed it before ever walking into this party. A ping sounded from my phone. I picked it up. Message from Lynn Harmon, County Clerk's Office. Just confirmed, all processed. Your sole title again. Congrats. I smiled. It didn't feel victorious. It felt quiet. I walked outside, the lights from the house casting a glow behind me. My shadow stretched long across the lawn. People glanced over, but said nothing. I stood taller. For the first time that day, I felt grounded. I found the catering captain near the drink station. Could you please relocate the dog area from the guest lounge to the garage? I asked, voice even. She blinked. Of course, ma'am, right away. Within moments, someone began folding up the dog gate and moving the plush cushions. Ophelie saw it first. She stormed over. What are you doing? I didn't raise my voice. You'll need written permission to use this space again, from now on. She looked stunned. We didn't need it before. That was then. Dorian stepped in, tense. Mom, seriously, what's going on? I met his eyes. I'm reclaiming what's mine, quietly, but permanently. His mouth opened to protest, but nothing came out. A few guests had paused, sensing something had shifted, but no one interrupted. No one defended either. I turned back toward the house, walked inside, and returned to the gift table. The box was still there, now smeared with dog drool and crumpled ribbon. I picked it up carefully, brushed the top, and placed it in my purse. They played their games in my house. I've just changed the rules. Dessert had been served. Guests milled about inside, some lingering near the wine table, others half watching as the slideshow screen glowed quietly at the far end of the living room. I stayed near the side wall, half shadowed by the armoire, when I overheard a woman complimenting Dorian and Ophelie. They're just so generous. All of this, so beautiful, so thoughtful, hosting like pros. Another voice chimed in. And footing the whole thing too? That's love. My stomach twisted. I opened my phone, pulled up the shared planning document Dorian had sent 2 weeks ago, the one I hadn't bothered to check since transferring the funds. My eyes scanned the spreadsheet. Paid by Dorian Kraft and Ophelie Ray. My name was nowhere. I scrolled again. Every expense, the catering, the decor, the rentals, marked as theirs. A sharp, cold quiet settled behind my eyes. They'd rewritten everything. Just then, the lights dimmed, and someone clapped twice. A large projection flickered on. The crowd turned toward the screen. The slideshow began. Soft music played. Images rolled. Ophelie painting a wall. Dorian planting a flower bed. Barkley curled up in a sunbeam. Ophelie holding a welcome mat. Home is where the dog is. There wasn't a single frame of me, not one. No image of me standing by the porch as it was being rebuilt. No shot of the day I signed the final escrow papers. No video of me laying out chairs the day the furniture arrived. None of the photos I had taken, hung, or funded. This was their movie, and I had been edited out. Someone behind me whispered, "They've built something really special." I stepped forward slowly, calm and steady. The screen kept flickering, freezing now on a photo of Barkley's cake table, where my antique box, his new toy chest, sat prominently displayed. I cleared my throat. The sound, while not loud, was sharp enough to cut through the music. The room stilled. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't plead. Every light in this house, I began, is powered by a bill in my name. Every tile in the kitchen was picked by my hand. And every dollar spent on this night came from the same account that's funded Dorian's last 3 birthdays. Gasps were soft but real. Dorian started to step forward. I raised my hand slightly, just enough. "I'm not angry," I said. "I'm just done being invisible." The screen froze behind me, paused on a frame of Barkley with a party hat. I turned back toward the crowd. I filed the title deed this morning. As of this evening, I'm the sole owner of this property. Any further use of this home's image, likeness, or space requires my written permission. I pulled a single sheet of paper from my bag and held it chest high. Not waved, not flaunted, just present. "You may try to retell the story," I said, "but I still hold the pen." Silence stretched thin. Ophelie bolted first, heels clicking across the hardwood as she rushed toward the back exit. Dorian followed, whispering something I couldn't catch. Maybe it was her name, maybe mine. The guests stayed frozen. No one clapped, no one laughed. A few slowly turned toward the screen again, where Barclay's wide-eyed stare seemed to blink back at us in awkward solidarity. I stepped aside, letting the light from the projector beam across the room. Rewrite the past all you want. I'll be rewriting the future. I stood in front of them again. Not in protest, not in desperation, but in stillness. The crowd had regathered in the main room for what they assumed would be closing remarks, perhaps a final toast. I held no glass, only a folded document, a single photo, and an envelope that had waited years to be opened. "I'll only need 2 minutes," I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. The room obeyed. Dorian stood beside the couch, shoulders stiff. Ophelie clutched her phone like a microphone she didn't know how to use anymore. I looked around slowly. I built this house. I financed it. I filled it with meaning and memory. And tonight, I was repaid by being erased. Gasps came in whispers. I held up the printed deed. "This is no longer yours to parade." Silence stretched long. Dorian tried to step forward, but I cut through the air with a single glance. I paid $7,000 for this night, $7,000, and not a single moment honored the woman who made this house possible. Instead, I was repackaged, rebranded, rewritten. A few guests turned to Ophelie. She shifted her weight, fingers twitching at her side. "I watched you turn my grandmother's heirloom into a toy bin. I watched you decorate my walls with pictures that didn't have me in them. You made this night about a dog. And in doing so, you made a statement. I was no longer the one who mattered." I took out the photo. It was crinkled at the edge. Chewed, actually. A snapshot of a letter. Barclay had gotten into my side table drawer earlier this week, and this page had been one of the casualties. I hadn't yelled. I just stared at the shredded edge and held my breath. "This," I said, holding it up, "was the last letter James wrote me before his surgery. It ends with 6 words I never shared. Until now." I unfolded the reprinted copy. "You are the home, Leona." There wasn't a sound. That line was meant to carry me through the years without him. I was going to frame it today, to finally bring it into the light. But instead, your dog ate it. Like everything else this family can't seem to treat with respect. Someone in the crowd muttered, "She's not wrong." I turned to face Dorian and Ophelie directly now. "This house is no longer available for your brand. You have 30 days to relocate." Ophelie's mouth opened. I didn't let her speak. "Unless you'd prefer to pay market rate," I continued, reaching into my bag and placing a neatly stapled rental agreement on the table. "You're welcome to become tenants, on paper, like adults." The silence wasn't awkward. It was honest. I didn't linger. I turned toward the hallway, walking slowly, letting the echo of my steps do the work. Barclay lay asleep near the fireplace, a pink pillow under his chin, untouched cake on the platter beside him. I didn't hate him. He was just a dog. And even dogs know when they've overstayed their welcome. Some humans don't. The lake outside my window barely moved, just the faintest ripple across the surface, like the water had learned to breathe slower. 2 months had passed. Not a sound from Dorian, not a phone call, not even a forwarded email. And that was fine. They moved out the week after the party. No shouting, no slammed doors. A quiet disappearance, as if retreat was their final performance. I watched from the porch as a U-Haul pulled away. They didn't wave. I didn't step off the porch. Their pages online changed too. Less of our home, more of new chapters. A few followers questioned it, then moved on. That's how it works now. Instant stories, no footnotes. I didn't chase closure. I didn't craft a public rebuttal. My life wasn't a PR campaign. It was bricks and wood and silence and decisions. It was a kitchen I cleaned myself, a deed I signed, a window I stood behind, watching, waiting, then letting go. Inside, on the mantel, sits the framed scan of James's letter. It's the only thing on the wall that matters. The chew marks from Barclay's incident are gone. I kept the original in a sealed envelope. I read it only once since. I don't need to anymore. "You are the home," it says. I used to wonder if that meant I had to hold it all together, but now I think it just meant I had to hold myself. This morning, as usual, Morris and I walked the trail by the lake. He's not like Barclay. No costumes, no curated photo shoots. Just a mutt with mismatched eyes who never barks unless something matters. We understand each other. I talk to him like he's a person. "You know," I told him this morning, "some people think strength is loud." He looked up, tail wagging once. "But strength," I added, "is knowing when not to speak." Twice a week, I sit with women at the Legal Aid Center. Most are older, some are younger. All are trying to write new chapters. They ask me why I volunteer. I say, because someone once told me I was the home, and a home should open its doors. Last week, an envelope arrived. No return address. But I knew the handwriting. Dorian didn't apologize. That would have required ownership. But he wrote, "I didn't realize how far gone I was from the boy you raised. I think about him a lot." I didn't write back. I placed the letter in the drawer where I keep the first one from James. Not in the trash. Not on display. Just kept. Some cracks don't need filling. They just need air and time. I've replaced the rug in the hallway, took down the gold-trimmed frames, painted the study a color I can breathe in. Morris likes to nap there. The sun hits just right around 3 in the afternoon. There's no noise here unless I want there to be. No curated moments. Just mornings, meals, soft music, a rescued dog who follows me from room to room like memory itself. Standing by the window now, I see a duck glide across the water. The ripples trail behind, delicate but permanent. Some wounds don't heal. They become part of the architecture. But I'm at peace. The house is mine. The silence is mine. The voice, that too. Not everyone gets the ending they wanted, but I got the one I needed. Life doesn't always hand you a neat ending. Sometimes the people you raise forget who helped them stand. And sometimes the only way to reclaim your voice is to stop waiting for someone else to hand you the microphone. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Boundaries aren't walls. They're front doors with locks you control. Forgiveness is optional. Peace is earned. And dignity? It begins the moment you decide your worth doesn't require anyone's validation. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to take your power back, quietly but completely? Have you ever been made invisible in your own life? Let's talk about it. Drop a comment and tell me your story. Or just say where you're watching from. If this story spoke to your heart, type 1 in the comments. Or tell me what part hit you hardest. And if it didn't, I still want to know. What would have made it real for you? Don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you won't miss the next story. Because the next one might be yours.